Hello and welcome to episode 6 of The Business of the Starving Artist with Hayden Woods, where we get you from being a starving artist to at least a surviving artist. As a disclaimer, all of the things that I talk about are my experiences as a musician and music educator, though we can take some of these lessons and apply them to other areas of the creative arts and or self-employment. This may be a shorter one. We're going to see where it lands, but we are talking about client clarity and making sure you set your expectations for yourself as the business person and for the client in what they expect out of you and what you expect out of them. There are a few stories that we can draw from for myself right off the bat. I'm going to go through as a teacher and then as a musician, and then I just remembered one as a composer. So let's just jump right into it. As a music educator, there are plenty of moments, and this has happened recently, where something comes up, either on my end or on the student's end or the family's end, and a lesson needs to get moved or canceled. And when we have something like this, there's always an attempt to try to figure out an alternative solution if possible. Like if the student is sick, but they're maybe at the tail end of it, maybe we try to find another day to teach the lesson so that they can still get that time. At the end of December, I should be taking a week off around Christmas time, and then the next week off, which would be New Year's time as well, to kind of get ready for my finishing up 2023, all the financial stuff that comes with running a business, but also kind of plotting what the next year could look like, either in terms of growing the business or for my students, maybe plan another optional recital. But all these things have to be set ahead of time. I mean, there's also the chance that you get a last minute thing that comes up again today. When I'm recording this, I've had one lesson that called out sick. Yesterday, I had a student that needed to move their lesson to another day, which is now happening on Saturday, and we were able to find that solution. But if we can't be clear about what it is that we need to do and how we're going to change this, how can we expect the client to know what they're getting out of it? As a musician, working in musicals for the local theater here, there are expectations set. Like, this is what you're expected to play. This is when you're expected to show up. And then once you complete all this, then here's how much you get paid for it. And that's been clear with contracts every single time, and correspondence by email to kind of prepare all of the musicians for that. For the big band group that I'm in, we have a Facebook group that's just for the musicians so that we can send out either any announcements on shows, or if we have to cancel for anything, like again around Christmas time, probably have to send one that says, hey, we're not playing these 2 weeks because it's on a Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, or even as simple as sending out what music we're going to play, or getting help with sorting 2 boxes of big band charts. But in any case, we set these expectations so that it's clearly laid out. And unfortunately, like, even then, sometimes it gets a little confusing and we have to be even more clear, but we can get to that in a minute. As a composer, I haven't done too much as far as commission work. I've done a couple of things that have been premiered either mostly at the local level, like the city band that's run in Bozeman had their 100th season not too long ago. So I wrote a piece for that. It was I have 2 movements done, and I promised, and it's written down in an email, that a third one needs to be completed, preferably before next year, just because that 100th season was basically the 2020 year where it had to get canceled, and then the next year was a shorter season. So there's some things to work out, but it is in the process. I've also got an email once before on somebody looking for help with a like a college paper, like helping develop different music ideas to show some differences. And at first, it seemed like a really good idea. But unfortunately, the client wasn't clear on their expectations on what they wanted. And by the end of it, it turned into this argument. I was like, well, how much do you want for work? I was like, well, here's the one idea that you asked for. It's like, well, no, I want 7 or 8 of these. I was like, well, that's going to cost you more. And ultimately, it it turned into this thing where by the time I was done even getting the first one sent off, I was ready to be done with this. So I sent the little bit of money that was paid for it back, and I was like, here, do it on your own. And unfortunately, they were not very pleasant in their reply. So I just kind of left them where they stood. And that's just something that happens. I mean, again, when you don't have clear expectations on both sides that everyone understands, that makes it hard to do business. And when I was looking into who this was, I'm not going to give any names, it looked like they were from Brazil originally, which to me means, did they have somebody else, or did they try to put into my language, obviously, what it is that they expected, and there was just a miscommunication because of maybe that's not their first language, or did I misunderstand something and misread a part of the email chain that came through. In the end, that one just kind of didn't happen, and that's okay. You have to move on from some of these little hiccups here and there. But this is where we get into the idea of setting expectations. And a lot of these things that I talked about dealt with the idea of having a contract, having accountability for that, making sure that you are valid in what you're pricing out for your work and being firm on it, and ultimately when you just need to put your foot down. With the contracts versus word of mouth, there we go, the word of mouth being the words I'm trying to get out of my mouth, contracts are safer. That's just plain and simple. Having something written down somewhere, whether it's on paper or in an email or in a text, is always better than just saying what it is. Because in a contract, it's written, it's binding for the most part. Usually if you're big enough where you have a legal team, they take care of a lot of that for you, as far as making sure that it's as clear as possible. When I started the business, I had a contract, just a template one. It was like, and then the student, am signing up for this lesson for this long, for this much money, scheduled every week, so on and so forth. And in the beginning, it was a good way to start collecting information on things like, what's the demographic that is being advertised to. So in my case, with music lessons, a lot of them were students beginning guitar and piano. So I shaped it around that. Obviously, there are a couple adult learners, and that's fine. I don't collect anything about age because it's pretty obvious that when I'm teaching, it's usually to younger students, but there are some that are learning older, and that's just as well too. Actually, sometimes that makes it easy to schedule lessons in the daytime, since my after school is mostly students in school. But after a while, the documentation just got to be a lot, because you have to keep it somewhere and you have to make sure you get everything done right. And I'm now at this point where I think I'm just going to create a template on my expectations and just have it be like, when you are taking lessons from me, here's the source for your expectations as the client and for me as the teacher. You will practice for X amount of time. You will meet X amount of weeks. These are the policies in case either party gets sick or needs a vacation, and so on and so forth. it also helps when you have a contract to be able to be held accountable for it and making sure that you can enforce it in a safe way that keeps everyone happy. Again, if I go back to where the lesson wasn't showing up, in my policy, it's like you have to let me know ahead of time if you're not going to make the lesson. And if you can't, we're going to try to make it up. But if you can't communicate that, you lose that lesson time and you still owe for that lesson. Now, unfortunately, what that ends up meaning is that sometimes if students lose communication or the parents stop calling, you might not get that money. And then you're out, you've lost that income because you weren't notified of it, which does give grounds for schedule somebody new in there, get that time slot filled. Same thing with any other piece of creative work or self-employment work. If you need to fill the time slot, you need to fill the time slot, or the people who missed need to account for it. Now, if I missed the lesson for anything, again, getting sick happens, taking a vacation happens, family emergencies happen. If I miss the lesson, I will do everything I can to either make it up throughout the week where I can, or at the very least, I will credit that time, especially if it was paid in advance. Like I like to have my lessons paid on a monthly basis, so I give out how much each lesson is, because a few lessons will have 5 in a row. For November, that's not going to be the case on Thursdays just because of Thanksgiving. But sometimes it happens. And if I miss a lesson, then I have to credit that lesson to the next month. If this is a student where they're paying on a weekly basis, there's a few of them, then on my end, they don't get, or they don't have to pay for that if it's on my end and we can't make it up. If it's something where, let's say, an instrument gets forgotten, it happens. Again, when you're teaching out of people's homes, you have to keep in mind that for band instruments in particular, they're taking that to school. But if they don't remember to bring it home, that's on the student. And then I'm still ready to teach, so therefore you still get paid. All of this kind of comes with the idea that whatever you're being accountable to and whatever the contract says, this is all part of keeping your price validity and firmness, making sure that you are protecting yourself as a business person, being able to afford to run this company, quote unquote. I mean, when you're a sole proprietor, you are basically a one-person show. So you're in charge of making sure that you get what you earned and that you can continue to do what you're working on. Again, I'm on year 5 of teaching, and let's be real again, that first year was very rough with only 3 to 4 consistent students and a number of ones that they started, they stopped, they started, they stopped. But now it's at a point where it is all consistent. And actually there's even one right now where there was 2 students that were going weekly that are now bi-weekly. And as of next week, the parent is going to take a lesson. One, it kind of helps with that time slot, filling it up, because I didn't want to have to try to find another bi-weekly one. But now it also allows a consistent schedule for them to still have lessons. As far as the firmness goes, this price firmness is mostly based on making sure you know and have researched your area and making sure that you can charge for this appropriately. Like if I tried to charge in my area $70 for half an hour, I don't see myself getting that many clients. On the other hand, if I only charge $15 to $20 for a half an hour lesson, I'm not making anything on it. I'm losing money especially to travel to each place and then be able to run it out of my house. So that's why the 30 is where it is. And that's why there was this discussion on maybe it should go up. Maybe it should be 35. Maybe it should be 40. Still deciding what I'm going to do with that. But either way, you have to be firm with it. Say, again, for physical media, when you create your contract, you say that the art or the commission, so the person paying for this commission, has a set price. So it's like, this is how much you're going to pay. This is what you're going to get out of it. And typically you protect yourself by going, okay, if you would like an alteration, you get so much done with no cost. But if it's an extensive one, probably due to not setting a clear expectation to the artist, then that's going to cost. If I get a composition commission, I'm going to make sure that I tell them, okay, this amount of money gets you this many instruments for this amount of time of music. And we set and decide what these parameters within that music is going to be. How fast is it going to be? How slow is it going to be? Is it going to be multiple movements? Is it going to be a full band, or is it going to be a chamber ensemble? Are we expecting this piece to be performed more than once? When I get the third movement of the Gallatin Suite done, I'm planning on releasing it on the Arrange Me site for like Sheet Music Plus, Sheet Music Direct, and then see from there if I can get into other like more physical print works. But in any case, we have to make sure that we're doing this right and pricing it right. But we also have to know when to put our foot down, because sometimes, and again, from the composer perspective, from the miscommunication with the client, you just have to know when something isn't going to work out. And whether it's in that or in like another music lesson where the student wasn't interested. They were playing trombone in their band and they were not interested in band. They didn't like their experience, and that it happens. So we switched to guitar. And the same thing happened where the student's not practicing that much. They only want to play one or two songs over and over again. And to me, that's not worth my time trying to teach something new when they don't want to learn it. It's not worth it to the student's time if they're not wanting to learn this instrument or wanting to expand their knowledge. And it's not worth it to the parent to pay that much for a lesson that the kid's not focused in. So we have to be careful on what we pick, because if we need to be able to say, hey, this isn't working, I need to walk away. And we're going to do this in a way that is, one, peaceful, and two, that makes sure that everyone leaves the agreement at least satisfied that it was a clean exit. So like telling the parents like, hey, this kid's not interested. I mean, we can keep trying this, but I'm not going to be the reason that a student decides that they no longer like music at all in any capacity. I'm not going to do that. So if we ever approach that point, then it's just like, okay, we need to be done. The child's or anyone's, how do I want to say this? The child or the student's willingness to appreciate the art is not worth destroying by them loathing lessons or practice. And I mean, there have been some students where like they like playing, but they don't like the lesson part of it because it is structured and it is a little bit different, and that's fine. Everyone does it a little bit differently. But you have to be able to walk away from it. And again, with the contract, it makes it safe to be like, hey, this is how we leave. We have to give notice. We have to kind of have an exit. At least in my mind, I like to have an exit lesson where I summarize things that maybe were worked on, things to consider if they decide to return, or things that they can kind of look into on their own if they wish to expand their knowledge without the use of a teacher. But that all just depends on their drive. So as long as we can be clear with our clients, then our businesses can thrive and survive from no lack of agreement or no confusion whatsoever. that's going to wrap it up for this one. Again, this one's a shorter one. This one, it took a little bit to kind of figure out how I wanted to structure, and I just decided a short one would be best just to kind of get it done. We may return to this with, if there's any questions on anything specific, we can readdress it, but I think this will be a good place to stop. So thank you very much for listening to The Business of the Starving Artist, and until next time.